Hello there, it's Richard Napier from Intelligent Advisor IT Consulting, and in this video we're going to look at one of the new features of Release 25B Monthly Update 1. There are several videos coming out in the next week or so because there's been some very interesting new features that have been released. This particular video will focus on the subject of namespaces. Now, this has been flagged for a long time and has been asked for by I don't know how many different customers. So it's really great that the product team have put the work in to deliver this. Let's start with a really simple demo. I'm going to create a new project, which I'm going to call RN25B. I'm going to create it locally, of course, and then I'm going to add it to my repository. I'm going to keep a copy of that name so I don't forget it. So far so good. I'll just log into the hub and push that up into the hub. I'll place it in my standard demonstration workspace, and off we go. Now I'm going to switch over to the hub, and I'm going to search for the project that I just uploaded. As you can see, this is just a standard project with its comments, and most of you will be very familiar with the options that you can see here. Where the change has occurred is in the branch menu. Now there are two options for branching. What I'm showing you works for Oracle Policy Modeling as well as Decision Service and Flow projects as well. The traditional branch, which we've had up to now, is now the Create New Project branch. However, the new feature, which is really interesting, is the copy into a namespace. And to copy it into a namespace simply requires that we create a name here. And once we do that, when this project is saved, so it's branched, it creates a copy, and the copy goes into that namespace. That namespace is essentially ring-fenced. It's a walled garden. So we can have the same project with the same name in two different namespaces. Incidentally, projects that are not in a namespace are technically considered to be in kind of like a generic global namespace. The principle of a namespace is that once it's in the namespace, not only will it be independent of any other copies of the same project that may exist in other namespaces, but any dependencies for this file. So, for example, if I now add an inclusion to this project, or I add a decision service reference, so that will also be part of my ring-fenced workspace, of my ring-fenced namespace. Let's go ahead and copy. And now that I've done that, if I go back up to the top here and I filter my list of projects, let's filter. So I now have two. You will notice that there is now a new column, namespace, which indicates that this is the version that is in the namespace. So on the hub, this column only appears once you start using namespaces. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Oracle Policy Modeling, and I'm going to show you that when you look at hub projects now, and we look at our project, you'll see that there are two, and you can clearly see that this is the one that is residing in the namespace. So for the purposes of this demo, I'm going to download that copy from the namespace, and you'll notice that the folder name appends the namespace. So here I am inside my project. For all intents and purposes, from a rule author's point of view, nothing has changed. Let's suppose that I now want to deploy this. So I'm going to put this as deploy namespaced version. And I'll go ahead and deploy it. But those of you who have eagle eyes will already have noticed that the interview URL contains the namespace version. I'll drop it into my workspace. And if I go into my deployments, you'll see that I have one deployment, and it is in namespace 25B. If I return to the original project, so the original version, which is not in a namespace, and I deploy this not in a namespace, so this is like a traditional deployment, namespaces don't affect how workspaces work. So you've still got to go through the whole business of, do I have permission to put things in a workspace? So now, if I redo my little search, you'll see that I have two deployments, one in namespace 25B, one not in any namespace. So I now have the ability to have two projects, multiple projects, multiple deployments with the same name. And the way we resolve what we're talking about is by referencing the namespace. So this introduces a really cool idea that we're able to create a branch, which you'll remember was the starting point. So we go back to our project and we started off with a normal project. We created a branch which initiated also the namespace. So that namespace could represent a release. So summer 2025, autumn 2025. So development can be going on that version with the same name as the original, but in an independent branch stream with its own namespace. We can deploy things that are inside or are not inside namespaces, and they will have the same names. So it becomes a much more flexible, well, a much more obvious way of managing releases through this concept of a namespace. And I also mentioned that once you have something inside a namespace, if that thing has dependencies, so if this particular version had a dependency to a decision service, that decision service reference is part of the namespace as well. So it's going to make it much easier to create a package by looking at what's in the namespace and saying, this represents everything that is required for a particular release. So that's a pretty major new feature, something that's been waited for a long time. While I'm here, I'll point out one other change to anyone who is in the cloud, is you might notice that the maximum number of activations has gone up. So this was announced also in 25B monthly update 1. The ceiling for the number of activations has gone up to 1,000 from whatever it was, 140 or something like that. So that's a piece of good news. The other features that we're going to talk about in another video refer to decision services and flow projects specifically. So that's why it's been separated off into another video. I encourage you to get your hands on 25B as soon as possible, whether you go through the customer portal config and you opt for an update to 25B, or whether you simply wait for the scheduled update to happen is up to you. And of course, your project will have particular constraints, but it's finally here, the ability to create namespaces. Enjoy. Speak to you soon.